for second one for November. Glad to have you with us. Looks like we're going to have a good turnout on the call. I just want to frame up that this should be we're going to do some updates around the activities that are happening in Congress. As you know, there's a lot going on, and some of it has direct impact on our work and certainly the communities that we work in. And then we'll devote most of the call to our discussions around this event we did in Chicago over the weekend. And I think we've learned a lot about outreach and what works and what doesn't, and things to build on. So we have a team of people who are deeply involved in the development and implementation of the housing fair. And we'll be very interested in if you all have some insights as well that we can all learn from. This is, I think, part of a bigger, broader conversation we've been doing over the past few years about how do we more effectively engage with consumers and ability. So I'm pretty excited about this. I think it's been a very helpful time. So with that note, so Matthew, I'm seeing that the pictures aren't, okay, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to turn over to Matthew and give us the my slide moving. So just, we wanted to run through a few things that are happening congressionally. Start off as we always do with federal funding. Folks probably know we're on a continuing resolution, keeping the government level funded through December 8th. There's been negotiations going on between leadership, so Speaker Ryan, Nancy, for the last few weeks, trying to reach an agreement on budget numbers that would essentially raise the spending caps that are in place for domestic and or non-defense and defense spending. Those seem to have kind of, it seems like they've essentially ground to a halt because the Republicans are focused on tax budget until they've finished their tax cut plan. The encouraging news is that Democrats are insisting on there being dollar for dollar increases. So for every dollar that they raise defense spending, that they raise non-defense spending by the same amount. It's happened before the December 8th deadline, so it means it's a near certainty that there'll be another continuing resolution. He still is saying at least that their plan is to get it done this year. That also seems very unlikely, but the takeaway is that there's almost either a few weeks or most likely into early 2018. So assuming that they are able to reach an agreement, the process will go like this. So the agreement will have a overall spending number that'll be some number of dollars higher than the number they had when the House and Senate wrote the bills that they've done so far. The appropriations and the subcommittees will have some more amount of money to divvy up between all the programs that they're responsible for. Once that happens, the subcommittee chairs and ranking members, so for THUD, that'll be Congressman Diaz-Balart and Price, and Senators Collins and Reed, with two bills that they wrote, and then using that additional money to start plussing up programs and reach an agreement on how to go about doing that. So that means, just to kind of let you know how we're approaching it and what we're working on. So in the House, our focus is primarily on Congressman Dent. I think folks, that's the case. He's been truly our biggest champion in all of Congress. He's more or less said publicly that once there's a higher spending number that he's committed to getting us back. Just to recap, in case folks don't remember, that current level was $55 million. The House for 2018 was $50 million, and the Senate
explicitly said publicly that he's committed to, once there's a budget agreement, getting that number back up to 55 million. So we're just, keeping up with him in his office and, making sure that we stay on his radar. But, we have a lot of confidence in Congressman Dent. On the Senate side, Senator Collins is where we focused our attention. I did not look to see if Laura Buxbaum's on the call, but she did a lot of work this week, which was very helpful to Senator Collins is from Maine, and Laura's group is up in Maine as well. We were essentially making the case for additional funding for housing counseling, getting us back to 55 million, talking about the great work that Maine groups do. We got them really helpful data on the impact that counseling has in Maine. Tried to understand a little why they had gone from 55 to 47 million, and I mean the answer more or less is what you would expect, which is we had tight constraints given the number that we had, and there was just no way to fund everything at the level we may have liked to. And then Senator Collins, but once this happens, once there's assuming there is an agreement, it'll happen relatively quickly. One of the staffers for one of the appropriations subcommittee leaders joked that his boss says that if they had, once they have a higher number, they can work out a bill in 30 minutes. So hopefully that will come together quickly, and we're obviously very focused on getting the funding back to $55 million. Is there anything you want to add on that, Bruce? I know that was a little long.
You got it.
All right. So we'll quickly run through these others. Just wanted to quickly mention this anti-settlements bill. This has been, an ongoing thing, but the House recently passed but it essentially says that Justice Department can't enter a settlement that basically provides a benefit to third parties. This is all rooted in the hearings and the attacks that have been made on counseling agencies receiving funding through some of the settlements with the banks. The expectation is that would have to come up in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Our understanding is that Senator Grassley, who chairs that committee, is very unlikely to bring and worked more closely on this bill, expressed to us that there's some concern that it could get tagged onto a year-end or a must-pass bill like the spending bills that are going to be coming up. So we also discussed that with Senator Collins' subcommittee staff person and made the case for why. He wanted our take on it. We made the case against it. I thought very well. Gore did a great job of talking about the impact that settlement guy and their ability to serve particularly foreclosure prevention clients. His read, the staff person's read, was that they have very little appetite for adding kind of these riders, these unrelated bills onto must-pass legislation. So he certainly gave us the impression not be inclined to include a bill like that into the DHUD spending bill. I'm going to go out of order here just very quickly on the tax bills. Folks have probably been following these, and I'm not in the weeds on these. I just wanted to quickly mention a few provisions that are directly related to housing. Those are, my section would be cut in half. So right now it's you can deduct up to $1 million worth of mortgage. This would cut it to $500,000. That's something that advocates have been pushing for a while, with the idea of advocates obviously arguing that that money should be reinvested in affordable housing, not corporations. The Senate bill does not include that provision. So the Senate bill would leave it at $1 million. That's something, obviously, if both chambers are able to pass something, they would have to hash out the difference. Something that came up very briefly, the trade-off is the House would lower the mortgage interest deduction. It would double the standard deduction. there's some debate about what impact that would have on home buying. If that were to happen, many fewer people, or at least fewer people, would have potentially some impact on home buying. And one other thing to mention quickly is there would be some changes to capital gains as it relates to homeownership and the time you would have to have been in the Senate or both. The amount of time you would have to have been in the House would be longer before you could take advantage of the capital gains tax, I think is more or less the change that would be made there. So just the Congress is almost one and only focus at the moment, and we'll watch that play out over the coming weeks. And then just to quickly mention, we put on here Dodd-Frank consumer protection rollback efforts, kind of unfolding this week, and I think the markup started yesterday and maybe going on today as well. But essentially, there had been negotiations in the Senate Banking Committee to reach some agreement on some additional slight relief from the Republicans would like some relief from some of the Dodd-Frank protections. That kind of fell apart, and a deal was instead negotiated with, or is being negotiated with, kind of moderate Democrats and the Republican leadership. Just did, and this is all coming from the Center for Responsible Lending and National Consumer Law Center, but just some of the impact it would have on housing. So one of the items is included is the Mortgage Choice Act. They describe it as it would allow many more risky, creating exceptions to the points and fees threshold. So obviously that would, having fewer loans qualify, get the protection of being a qualified mortgage would not be good for consumers. Seeking mortgages in the amount of $250,000 or less from the definition of higher risk mortgages, therefore from the appraisal requirements required under TILA. And I think those are the couple of things I wanted to highlight on that. Sorry, I've gone on a bit longer.
Your point actually just reminded me of one quick thing, which was that on the Hill, and especially with the Banking Committee in the Senate, the tax bill has taken everybody's attention. That also impacts us because we've been really concerned about FHA commissioner get approved. So Brian Montgomery, who's the nominee, did have a hearing, but they haven't voted on it and has been voted to go to the floor yet. And that's probably not going to happen until the tax bill's dealt with. So that's a bit of a logjam for us because we think a real opportunity in a place where housing counseling needs to get integrated more effectively. I think we continue to see support from the new administration on housing counseling, especially here that we'd love to get rolling. And FHA, as we all know, is the biggest source for mortgages for people of color in the country right now, and has the greatest flexibility in most cases. So that's a bit on hold right now. We did support Brad Montgomery as the nominee and wrote a letter of support for him. Something I had kind of conflated a couple of things on the Dodd-Frank. So the markups that are happening now are in the House Financial Services. I know that Ellie from Empire Justice, or HomeSmart New York rather, had to reach out to New York members who are on financial services. I will try to circulate something. I mean, I believe that there are some Democrats who are on board with this, and the important thing is to keep the number of Democrats as few as possible. So I will circulate
to the listserv a list of the members who are on financial services, along with the text that HomeSmart New York had circulated, which is, I think, is based on this CRL and CLC letter. Shoot an email, make a call, encouraging your members not to support this. That would be great. Ellie just messaged that some of the markups are done. I think they're happening yesterday and today, but I could be wrong. But that is all on that.
Okay, thank you. Certainly when they're in district meetings and you go, it's really worth it, as always, to say that we are very interested in getting the current allocation for HUD housing. And we'll start working actually on the 2018 budget. Do that right? Yeah, 2019. Yes, I'm just trying to do the math on this. So it'll be the 2019 budget. We're going to start working on that shortly, and there'll probably be a sign-on letter coming out soon. All right, we had Deutsche Bank had a settlement, which Department of Justice settlement, which included a requirement that they do consumer-facing events, 3 a year, and we ended up getting the contract in a joint proposal that we did with Unidos US, Home for USA, National Capacity, and the National Urban League, and event in Chicago. And we'll do 2 more this year, and we're hoping that we'll get the contract renewed, and we'll have another shot at another 3 over the following year. To me, this is a huge opportunity because there's some serious money available, and we're using it to invest in different outreach strategies and really trying to figure out what works. And our first event in Chicago went really well. We're going to talk a little bit about the event itself. But then we'll spend much of the discussion kind of on the outreach piece, because I think that's, we would love to hear from you about what your observations are on our learnings. And we definitely want to build on what we do. I sort of feel like this is in some ways a beginning rather than an end, and it opens more doors than it, there's opportunity, and we have to figure out how to make the most of the opportunity. Very excited about all this. We had a terrific group of organizations in Chicago who were just very impressive. Community both worked together really well and also just displayed continuing leadership and flexibility, and had a real collegial attitude around this. And we ended up generating a fair number of putting together a very good event. So good news is that Deutsche Bank was very pleased and impressed. They have a monitor. All the bank settlements are monitored by an outside third party, and the senators there, they appeared to be thrilled, and there was a lot of pluses. So with that note, so Karen Woods from NHS Chicago will start us off with plan was and what it looked like. Karen?
Thank you, Bruce. Again, my name is Karen Woods, and I'm the Director of Homeownership Services at NHS of Chicago. My role with the event was centered around event planning and logistics, working closely with Bruce, Ellie, and Laura. The event was held Saturday, November 11th from 10 to 2. And in planning the event, we really approached this as a great opportunity to introduce attendees to housing counseling. From the registration data, we saw that most of those registered had never worked with a housing counseling agency before. So this was a real chance for us to highlight our services and the benefits of working with the counseling agencies involved in the event planning and 15 counseling groups that participated in the event. The participating groups set up information tables in the main entrance to the venue. So we were up front and center and greeted participants as they arrived. In addition, counseling groups staffed tables in two areas, our homebuyer counseling area as well as our foreclosure prevention counseling area. So the event focused on both service types. In those counseling areas, this allowed for the agencies to have brief one-on-one consultations with attendees and the chance to schedule post-event appointments and enroll participants in classes and workshops. Also, there was offered a homebuyer orientation workshop. That was a 30-minute workshop that repeated throughout the day, which provided an introduction to the home buying process. There were also free credit reports offered, and that proved to be a very popular service that was incorporated into the event. In addition, there was a vendor or partner area that with partners representing a range of services, the participating partners that they regularly worked with. So that included lenders, real estate agents, property inspectors, insurance agents. We really wanted to represent the full spectrum of the home buying team, but also promote ourselves as housing counselors as a part of that home buying team. The partners were very pleased with the event overall and the turnout. We had 185 households that participated with a steady stream throughout the course of the day. As counseling agencies, we were able to, and I think, very importantly, we were able to enlighten attendees on the services and the resources that are available through our agencies. As one participant said to me, I just didn't realize that there were so many groups that can help you buy a house. So that was very satisfying. So all in all, I think we had a very successful group, a very successful event. And with that, I will turn it over to Ellie and Laura to talk about our outreach and marketing.
I'll just add that we had a little over 300 households that came, individuals that came, so we were measuring really households, but, it was a reasonably good crowd, but we also ended up creating a few who were interested who didn't come, so we'll talk about that. But it was definitely a big plus. So, Ellie, talk to us about what the outreach strategy looked like.
Hi, everybody. Ellie Pepper with Empire Justice Center. And just to, as quickly as background, I'm working with Bruce to help organize these events in different areas. So this was the first one, as Bruce mentioned. So we, as part of, under the Deutsche Bank settlement, we were unusually able to access funds to do quite a bit of marketing and advertising, which, from a housing counseling agency perspective, that's pretty unusual. We don't always get this kind of leeway and ability to really reach out. So we tried to really target some Hispanic households by the use of Univision, and we paid for 69 radio ads that were done over a 2-week period on 2 different radio stations, Spanish-speaking radio stations. They did a television segment that was aired once the Monday before the event, and then it was re-aired again the Friday before the event, and we were allowed to use it as a Facebook post in our Facebook event. Did an email newsletter, morning edition, to 40,000 subscribers of the Chicago Sun-Times, which is a general newspaper that is seen across the city. We did a 1/4-page ad for 2 Sundays and then 2 weekdays for in the Chicago Sun-Times. 2 newspapers that are specifically targeted to the African American community in Chicago, the Chicago Defender and the Crusader. The Chicago Defender it's a weekly paper. Both of these are weekly papers. The Chicago Defender is on Wednesdays, and we had 1 full-page ad the Wednesday prior to the event, and then 3 email blasts that went out, one two of them the week before and one 2 weeks before. Page ad. They're also a weekly paper, as I said, and they come out on Thursdays, so that full page ad was done the week prior to the event. Housing Action Illinois had a conference 2 weeks prior to the event, and we had an ad in that conference booklet. BronzeCom is a newsletter that is done via email, and again, we originally started with 4 email newsletters. After we did 2 of them, we decided instead of doing 2 more, we switched to doing an email alert of the event, because within the newsletter, we were kind of buried in the newsletter, and an email alert was just our ad. So we did one of those the week prior to the event. Then radio stations, other than what we did with Univision, one of the groups that was involved really targets Korean-speaking residents. So they, that we put together for Univision, they translated it to Korean and did some radio spots on Korean radio and then also Christian radio. There was the Chicago Urban League was involved. They do like a Monday morning spot on a radio station in Chicago, so they talked about the event a couple of Mondays. That was free, actually. WBEZ, which is a public radio station, we put together a public service announcement, and it was done on that radio station. There were church bulletins that were done at some of the churches in college. Distributed some of our flyers, and then the final traditional traditional form of marketing that we did was for each of the groups that were involved. They printed the flyer and distributed in their traditional ways that they distribute, whether that was through regular snail mail or going door to door, and also to as they were at different events and different other agencies distributing the flyer that way. So that's pretty much the outline of what we did for all of the traditional media outlets. And so I'll turn it over now to Laura Slabaugh, who can talk about our social media effort.
So actually, just before Laura goes, we spent a lot of money on all that. We spent almost $30,000. $28,982.
Yeah, I will comment that the Univision radio ads and television segment was $12,000 of our budget.
And Ellie, so just quickly, someone asked, and I don't know if you know this or not, but how many impressions were there from traditional media?
Well, we'll let Laura talk about Facebook first, because I don't want to steal her thunder, and then we'll talk about the results of all of our media.
Good. So Laura, you're up.
Yes, awesome. So hi, my name is Laura Slabaugh, and I work in communications and development at the Northwest Side Housing Center. So kind of like everyone said, this was a really great experiment to see how marketing an event of this size and scale really works. And we were fortunate to have a pretty healthy budget to do so. So it really produced a lot of really good data and want to share with all of you, so that as you go on to market events, you can hopefully learn some tricks. So some of my biggest key insights and takeaways was that Facebook was by far the most successful platform for getting the word out about this event. I just saw yesterday from our file that of the 550 people who registered for the event, who actually clicked in and filled out their demographic and information on our survey, 377 of them marked that Facebook was the way they heard about this event. So I think it goes without saying that Facebook's really vital to every organization, and especially for promoting events. Overview of the kind of hits we got, what worked, and what we might want to improve for next time as we move forward and market more events. Yeah, I see that there's the slides here that have some data if you want to click through. So just as an overview, we reached roughly 160,000 people from start to finish on this event, and it ran for about 5 weeks, I want to say. So of the 160,000, we had 10,000 people actually click into the event and take a look at it. And of those, we had 3,500 mark themselves as going or interested. So you can see already how that whittled itself down. Here, this first graph kind of shows you what I just said. People reached. The next graph, if we could click ahead, people who responded. So yeah, the people who marked themselves as interested, as we see with a lot of Facebook events, outnumbered the people who actually marked going. You can click ahead. Event actions. So this was one of my biggest takeaways from this event, like I've never seen before. People were interacting, commenting, liking, and sharing, and I think that's due to how much we posted in the event. So my biggest tip for creating events is to really post in them. I tried really hard to put in really flashy language like, come get your credit report pulled, or come sit one-on-one with a housing counselor, learn how you can plan to buy a home. We used really grabbing language, and I think that really worked because people were asking questions on all the posts, they were tagging their friends, and they were sharing it themselves on their own. So that's a big lesson for me, is to not just create a Facebook event, but to use it as you would use your own social media page. Really post and engage with it, and people will engage back with you. You can click ahead. Demographics. We found it interesting that overwhelmingly women responded to the event far more than men. Maybe this wasn't so surprising to me, at least at our housing council, women, female-headed households, widows, so maybe that wasn't so surprising. But yeah, you can see here that women engaged with the event more so than men. And then I think our last slide shows, devices. So this was another myth that really was debunked for me. You can see that people looked at the event far more on a desktop computer than they did their mobile. And it seems like I'm always hearing about people are always on their phones, people check emails and look at everything on their phones. But for this event, people looked at it on their computer. I found that interesting. So to kind of wrap up, some of the things that I thought worked well for us was having multiple hosts for the event. So again, I'm at the Northwest Side Housing Center, and we created the event page, but we invited every housing agency. There were 10 of us total involved to be a host on the event. And I think that really helped the event to just spread organically itself and reach each housing counseling agency's networks. Posting in the event helped. Like I said, every time we posted in the event, we saw bigger spikes in registration and engagement. And then to kind of wrap up, I'll talk about boosting the event, because that's when you pay Facebook to advertise for you. I don't know if anyone in this call is the social media person at your organization, but boosting a Facebook post is when you pump money into it, and Facebook can target people by demographic, by location, their interests, pages they like. So we got really deep into boosting the event 3 or 4 times. And I will say that it really did help us reach a lot of people. For instance, one of our boosts reached 25,000 people, but it kind of creates an illusion. Of that, only about 600 clicked into the event, and of that, only 200 responded. So boosting is a great way to reach people, but I think you have to be careful to not cast your net so wide that you're not intentional about who you want to reach. So that's one of my biggest lessons moving forward, is the next time I boost an event, maybe narrow the scope a little bit. I think that's all I have to say about Facebook.
Okay, so we'll want to talk a little bit about this the scope for a minute and just let this discussion go. So, in a perspective, remember we spent $28,000 on the traditional media. Do you remember off the top of your head how much we spent on Facebook, Laura?
And if I could just jump in, someone asked specifically how much you spent on boosting. Do you have
that? Was
that's the
22.
Oh, that's okay. That's the only cost. Okay, and an increase. It didn't produce huge surges, but part of our goal here is to reach people that we hadn't normally reached. I mean, I think that was really the biggest goal of why we did all this media, really trying to figure out how to expand the client base for housing counseling groups. And by far, Facebook was by far the most successful avenue for doing that.
And with that boosting, we did reach more people. But what I'll say, we had a registration format, and that was through SurveyMonkey. And by the way, people are continuing to register for the event, which I think is interesting because we have not shut down the survey. But every time that we had a surge in the number of people who registered for the event was when somebody from one of the organizations posted in the event. So, for instance, the first time that Northwest Side Housing Center, in the event, they included the link to the SurveyMonkey, and there was an incredible surge of people that day. So, whereas we had been seeing maybe 4 or 5 people registering on the day that Northwest Side Housing Center posted in the event, we had 35 people register. So the boosting is great because it widens the area and the number of people that you actually reach. But what really makes a difference and really gets people to engage is when there are posts in the event. And I think, Laura also had commented that people, when you post, people were engaging with those posts and asking questions and tagging their friends. So it was really beneficial. And I don't know how many new likes the different organization people through social media to really engage with the individual organizations' pages as well.
The Northwest Side Housing Center got at least 400 new likes to our page. We went from 1,000 to 1,500 on our own Facebook. So this was, I can't say how beneficial it's been to let more people know about housing counseling and your specific services. It was just a really great opportunity to cast the net.
There's a number of questions looking for all kinds of as much kind of data you have on impressions and things, and I can run through some of the specific questions people have. But just while we're on Facebook, someone asked if you all learned lessons that you could share on how to be effective with boosting. They said they had tried it once, that it didn't help much. So, did you learn some lessons on how to use that?
It was kind of an experiment for me too. It was really just putting money in and seeing what happened. And I did a little research myself along the way because this was also my first time ever putting money into Facebook. I would say to add as many demographic, interest, and specific location tags as possible, because like I said, while it can look really flashy to say $500 will help you reach 30,000 people, maybe it's better to put in, $100 to reach a smaller net of people and get really specific with that group. Cast your net a little smaller, maybe the first time you try boosting, and see how it works so that it's not such an overwhelming amount of data sitting before you to then analyze. So I would start small, see what works, and then use more money. Because, we're all nonprofits, right? Money is tight, but we've put, at the housing center here, we've put $5 into a boost before, and it's been pretty beneficial. So I would just start small and then get bigger.
So you put $5 in, and then what happened? What was the result?
It reached out a grant we received or something, and it reached a couple hundred more people and got more likes than a usual post would. So that was a pretty beneficial use of a couple dollars.
And why don't you describe what the choices are in when you're doing Boost? What are the demographic pieces and some thoughts you might have on that?
Yeah, so Facebook lets you target by gender, age, I believe language spoken at home. I mean, if you can dream a demographic, it's in Facebook. And a lot of times they pop up because it's pages that people like. So for instance, one of the tags we used was people interested in affordable housing, and that would target people who are renters, who are homeowners, people interested in house hunting or looking to buy a home for the first time. So those were all the housing related tags that we used in our boost. And there's just thousands and thousands. The lists are really long to pick from.
Okay, and one other observation that a number of us, the people that came to the session were further along in the pre-purchase marketplace than, that they were better prepared. The people had more down payment money, their credit scores were better, they had more incomes that ready than we typically get at these events, and that may have had some relationship to it too. But these tags are important, and we tried, and we did a set around people who would be existing homeowners that we're trying to market the foreclosure prevention services. And our sense was that wasn't as successful. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, I would agree. We had more people register for the event who had an interest in pre-purchase. It was a more successful tag as well.
So regarding registration, I want to comment that at this point, we're up to 595 people who have registered for the event, and we were at 550 at 6 a.m. the morning of the event. A larger number of people than what actually came to the door. And we had sent email reminders to people twice, so the week before. So although I think it was around 80 of the pre-registered people came to the event, these other 500 people are now a source of outreach for the different organizations. 110 plus people came through the door not pre-registered. And the lion's share of the people who came were for pre-purchase, and they had heard about the event from Facebook, even the people who had not pre-registered. That's where they'd heard about it from.
And one other thing to add to that point is that Facebook page, we have 3,100 people who've indicated they were interested, and then 477 who said they were going. And so we don't know about of that how many of those people actually made it or actually registered. But we're pretty confident. Well, there's certainly plenty of people that we can market to. We have that we can add to the list here. So, Matthew, you got some questions in the queue?
I do. One question. So this is from someone who's describes their organization as having a challenge to engage hard to reach, quote unquote, hard to reach communities. So it's online versus the traditional media. So the question is, what differences, if any, were there between clients that responded to online versus traditional media? And I don't know if you know these specifics, but were they different age, income, ethnic groups, graphic information in terms of the impact of the traditional outreach versus the online outreach?
I know I've seen it. I can tell who the ages of our audience. Yeah, right here. It looks like a majority who responded to the Facebook were between the ages of 25 and 44. But 20% of people who engaged with the event were between the ages of 55 and 65 and over. So I would say it might not seem like it, but I mean, everybody pretty much has a Facebook now. My grandma's 90 and she's on Facebook and active. So I wouldn't, I don't want to be ageist and say that just because someone is 65 and doesn't have a smartphone that they're not on Facebook, because I mean, they are, and they responded and they came.
Sorry, go ahead, Ellie.
I was just going to say we don't have specific data that says, okay, so these people are, these people came because it was Facebook and here's their demographics. I think that that's what the person is looking for. Like, this demographic came because of this outreach. We don't have that specific of data, but what I can say, there were 3 reasons why we offered people 3 reasons, 3 types of assistance. They were coming for home buying, help with their mortgage, or credit check. Most of the people were home buying, and then second was credit check. Very few were engaging because they wanted help with their mortgage. Like I said, most people heard about the event through the Facebook page. The second most popular was through email, but we aren't sure which email, or it came from our paid advertisements that we did through email. Most of the people had not already been involved with a housing counseling agency, so that's a plus. There were most of the people were not Hispanic. We had a smaller percentage of Hispanic population than we had hoped, because we did do very specific media with Univision that was targeted at the Hispanic population. So we were disappointed in the number of Hispanic households that engaged. The majority of the people who engaged that they chose in the survey that we had for people to register. And then, again, most people were English speaking. So what I'll say is most of the people who came through our SurveyMonkey came as a result of Facebook, with second in line being email. And most of the people were African American, and the large majority of the people had never been involved with a housing counseling agency before. So I don't know if that's the questions that I hear what people are trying to get at, and I don't know if we can give that specific of information.
So, I mean, I think one thing to point out is that we did do some specific. The HANA Center has a terrific program which reaches out to nations, and so they had a specialty in Korean, and so we had a mailing to people in Korean. We had a flyer in Korean, and we had a radio by in Korean. I believe we ended up with 3 people, and though it's possible that there's the event, but we have they've been reached. I mean, we're not saying this is for everything and everybody, and we continue to hear that community newspapers work in some communities that where there's, especially where there are language issues. It was pretty overwhelming how much Facebook dominated both the people that came and the people who registered, and there's more to be learned here. One more thing I'm going to quickly mention, I think, about this idea about reaching out to groups.
Oh, yeah. On a call with HomeSmart New York yesterday, I was speaking about the event and what our experiences were. And one group suggested that Another way to really connect with people on Facebook and get it spread even wider on Facebook is to post the event on different pages. So for instance, if we really want to target a specific population, look at pages that are groups specifically for that population, and then post the event on that Facebook page, that Facebook groups page. We do with another one.
So just quick questions. Could you just go back on the date, and then someone was curious what the weather was like on the day of the event.
It was cold. It was it snowed the day before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
It was this past Saturday. It was November. We did it on November 11th.
Right. So Veterans Day weekend.
Think probably limited turnout to an extent. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, no, I do think
I think so.
yeah, people told
Yes.
me that. Oh yeah.
Okay. Somebody just asked how many people attended the event.
So it was a little over 300. We registered people was actually by household because we don't really need to know everybody's name was in the crowd. The idea was we wanted to focus in on the client household. So 185, but over 300 people were there physically. And we had 75 housing counseling agency staff, and there was also Center for Economic Progress, which provided credits, and then there were vendors. But the feeling people got was that everybody got clients from this, and the clients were very useful. The right people come here. I passed the flyer out with the email this morning, which Laura designed and I think was catchy, and it seemed to work best for the pre-purchase.
All right. So one other quick question, and then there's a couple more kind of bigger picture questions that hopefully I think we can get to. Could you just talk a little bit about where the facility where the event was held?
It's Malcolm X Community College of Chicago, and there was some discussion about whether people go, who would go and who didn't in terms of the neighborhood and accessibility. There was free parking, which we made a big deal about, and but there was some feeling that I heard mixed reports about whether the location was perfect or not.
The venue itself was lovely. I will say that it was perfect.
And it was located off the major expressway, so I think there were lots of options on ways to conveniently get there.
So I think the biggest picture question is, so going forward, what lessons do allocating marketing dollars to traditional versus social media?
Well, so others can jump in as well. There's no question in my mind that we will devote more to social media and maybe think about how to design it more, maybe engage with this. I mean, we want to keep learning here, and we want to invest in this particular slice of technology. We're not going to step away from doing some kind of traditional media, and probably the next place will be not as expensive a market so that those dollars will go further. Latino consumers in the door here. They're such a major part of our business, and I was really surprised that we didn't score as well as we did there, especially since we put a lot of emphasis, and we had deep we're doing that. We're working in Spanish-speaking communities. So want to pay a lot of attention to those questions. We had so the way you would register is through a SurveyMonkey, and we had few of the 9902 data fields there, so we're trying to just make the work happen more easily. People did fill that out. I was a little worried they wouldn't. At the end, it said, bring these materials to the meeting. Interviewed. The whole idea was we're trying to get people to be further down the line on this. We did hear from people that, you know, they couldn't pull the materials together, or they didn't have the time to do it, and stuff like that. I think our assessment is that we won't ask for, or maybe really low-key it if we do. That got in the way for some people coming. The other thing that, okay, so here I am. It's around noontime. The first rush has come through. There's people coming in steadily, but there isn't really a long line or anything. So we then print out the list of people who've registered, and the idea is we'll call them. A couple pages of names, and I'm sitting there doing my calls and leaving messages for people, and occasionally talking to somebody. And I noticed that the other counselors are kind of just sitting on their phone and text. They had it somehow memorized, and then they would just paste it into the text and just put in the phone number. And bang, 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 went through their lists in much less time than I did. And I talked with Sophia, and she was upset because she'd forgotten about the event. And I asked her, well, would it be intrusive if we did a text to remind you? And she said, that would have been perfect. I always see that when I open my phone. Going forward, as another piece to all this, and I think we have to figure out this kind of, where do people gather in the social media world? This group idea, are there other, those are my thoughts.
All right, we've still got a few more questions, so hopefully we can try to get to all of them. What are your plans to keep people who are interested in and engaged with the event but weren't able to or interested?
So the plan is to
really. Oh, go ahead, Ellie.
I was just going to say the plan is to take the registration information and parse it out among the group, all of the groups that took part, for them to then reach out to those people.
The page that marked interested or
yeah, I was just about to say, we've had people comment and say, hey, I couldn't come, what can I do? And I've been replying individually to people and answering questions that people have been sending directly to our Facebook page's inbox, and just having them call us, and we'll refer them from there.
And is Moss, is there a way to, we've got their Facebook
No,
name.
I don't think. I think Facebook prohibits you from having the power to do that. You can't directly message that many people at once, but you can post in the event.
And what about just sending a message to taking 20 names off of there and sending a message?
You could do that. Mm-hmm.
And we divide it up.
That'd be pretty taxing, but we could do that.
Yeah. Well, we divide it up. You know, I mean, the idea is that we know something about these people, that they have responded to. They're very interested in what we're trying to do. So that makes them it's much more than a shotgun approach here.
All right. Could you just talk, someone asked if you had people walk around to see the vendors, or if you did workshops going?
Karen, you want to do that? Karen, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. Do the client flow.
Yes. Well, the client flow, we started with the counseling agencies, with our general information tables, and then we encouraged people to meet with the counselors. And at each station that they could stop at, we encouraged them to take the next step and explain what the other resources were there for the day. So it really started with the counseling agencies, and after we met with them, we encouraged them to meet with the vendors and then to also participate in the home buyer orientation workshop and to have their credit pulled.
So
So
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I just got to say, it was exactly right that the whole idea, we actually kind of hid the vendors back in the balances of counseling agencies, and the first round of so people have already registered. They're then sent to the tables, and then there we figure out, are they in there for pre-purchase, foreclosure, or something else, and then they get directed to an agency. And there are separate rooms for each. And then after that, the vendors are done it. So I think fairs, the vendors are out there, people go and wander around, and our whole strategy, which Karen and Ellie and Laura worked out on a site visit a few weeks ahead of time, was since these first get them into and the idea is that they're trying to set up an appointment and get people into the longer term program. Oh, good. Okay, so we're in good shape. I think this was an excellent conversation. So I'll close out here and just say that we're very interested in these questions. So if you're doing some more thinking about this, we will have other conversations like this. But shooting me an email or giving me a call about what your experience is. We're going to test a lot of different things out here, and hopefully this will be useful to our entire community. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm very anxious to get the next events going and to try to keep this going as well. But huge thanks to the Chicago groups who are just stellar, and really appreciate that a lot. Thanks so much, everybody. We just a quick reminder about joining NHRC. We're at the end of the year. So, hey, build us into your budget for 2018. Make sure we get included there. I'll send out a reminder email about that. How we're able to do the things we do is really by your membership support, and allows us to lobby without any restrictions. It allows us to be able to pull together events that allow organizations to work together cooperatively on a mass of things, that hopefully help the community. We're a great, excellent work and inspiring work, and letting us be a voice for that. We really appreciate that a lot. So please join if you haven't joined, and groups. We have a kind of renewal drive going on, and just send out renewal notices. Just please act on it soon. We weren't quite where we wanted to be in terms of meeting the goal for the end of the year, so it'd be great if everybody steps up, and then we'll easily pass it. Okay, everybody, nice work out there, and we'll be, and you know what? So we're going to have James Rudick on our next one in early December, and he's going to be talking about some innovative work they're doing. It's part of our innovation series. They're doing some work around, I think you'll find it very stimulating. He's always a big ideas guy, and thinking somewhat out of the box here on things. We'll get, I think it'll be a high value conversation. So mark your calendar for that one, December or not. We'll figure that out by the time we do the next call. Have a good Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks. Thanks all.